Hi, welcome to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Kristen. So for today's video, I'm going to be sharing my top 10 books of 2022. Honestly, I feel like I read a lot of really mediocre books this year. Like, there was just so many that really weren't that great. I remember last year I was struggling to like share my top 10 and like pick which ones I wanted. I was even going to do like more than 10. This year, I feel like it was just way easier. Like, I wasn't struggling at all. I just like knew which ones were the top 10. I cheated a little bit because there were some where I just grouped them together because they were part of the same series. If I didn't do that, like half of my top 10 would be taken up by series, but I am going to share like my favorite of the series. Anyway, so these are kind of in order. I'm going to start obviously at like number 10 and then work up to number 1, like my top read of the year. They're a little bit interchangeable, like some of these, because some of them I'm just like not sure where I would rank them, like, and I changed it so many times throughout the year. But yeah, let's just get into my top 10 books. So the first book is From Lukov with Love by Mariana Zapata. So this was actually my very first read of 2022 and I fell in love with it. I thought it was so good. I was like really happy that this was my first read and that it was like a success in terms of reading, just because I didn't want to start off the year with like a bad book. So I'm glad that I started with this one. It did start to go downhill after this because I remember book number 2 wasn't that great. But anyway, this book follows Ivan and Jasmine. They're both figure skaters. It's like enemies to friends to lovers, and they are pair skaters. They end up pairing up together because they both need a partner to compete, and then of course they start to fall for each other. It's a very slow burn, but I just really loved this book. I loved the progression of their relationship. It was a really just sweet book. It's probably my favorite by Mariana Zapata. I did a book review for this one. I actually did dedicated videos for almost all of the books that I'm talking about in this video, so I'll link all of those down below if you want to know more of my thoughts on them. Like I said, this was my first book of the year. Honestly, part of me wishes I had read better books than this, because it's like my very first read of the year was in my top 10. I feel like I should have been reading much better books that should have like beat this book and like been better. Like, I wish I had read so many good books that I struggled with coming up with my top 10, but it was hardly a struggle, and this one was one that's in the top 10. The next book is Blindside by Candy Steiner. This is a college sports romance. The main character is a football player on a college football team, and then he starts fake dating the PR coordinator of the team. Their deal is basically that she likes this other guy, so he's going to help her get that guy's attention, and then he's trying to get his ex-girlfriend back. So they start fake dating to like kind of make those other people jealous, and then of course they start to fall for each other. And yeah, this book was so cute. I loved it so much. I was so happy with it. It was a 5-star read. All of these obviously were 5-star reads, but yeah, this one was a really great book and I really enjoyed it. It was just a cute kind of light sports romance. It had good characters, and it's part of a series. It's the second one in the series, but this one is the one that I love the most in that series. I was surprised by how much I love this book. I didn't expect it, and obviously now it's in my top 10 of the year. The next book is Long Shot by Kennedy Ryan. This is where I'm getting into the series. So this is part of the Hoop series. So the first book is Long Shot, the second book is Block Shot, and then the third book is Hook Shot. I recently did a video talking all about the series. It's spoiler free. I went in depth on what it's all about and just my thoughts on it. So I specifically am including this series because Long Shot was my favorite. This one is definitely in my top 10 of the year. It was just amazing. I loved this book so much. It was extremely heartbreaking. Definitely check trigger warnings for this one. It deals with very heavy graphic content, but overall it was just a really amazing story. It follows Iris and August. August is a basketball player, and then Iris is this girl that he meets, and they kind of have this instant connection, but they're not really able to be together, and that's about all I'm going to say on it. But yeah, I would definitely recommend this one. It's one that I'm very happy that I read. A lot of these books I read them earlier this year, so my top 10 was kind of set for most of the year, and then I read this book and it just was added into my top 10 because I just loved it so much. The next book is The Light We Lost by Jill Santopolo. I read this book back in July. I kind of spontaneously picked it up. It had been on my shelf for so long, and I read it in a day, which is something that I never do, but I literally couldn't put this book down. I did do a book review on this one that's up on my channel because I just had so much to say about it and I literally couldn't stop thinking about it. It was a very just thought-provoking book, and I kept like questioning so many things after I read it. But yeah, it's a really amazing story. Basically, the two main characters are Lucy and Gabe. They meet on September 11th, 2001, so on the day of the 9/11 attacks, and then they kind of have this connection, but nothing really like happens between them. They kind of have to go their separate ways. They just kind of spend that day together because obviously something very traumatic was going on, and they just kind of happened to be near each other, so they just kind of like stayed together. But then they end up running into each other again like after college, I'm pretty sure, and at that point they start up a relationship. They have this like amazing, intense, like soulmate type love, but then he ends up getting a job in the Middle East as a photojournalist, and so he leaves. And then after that, it just kind of goes through the next 14 years of their lives, of them just kind of going in and out of each other's lives constantly, and it's told in second person, and she's just telling their story basically from when they met up into like the moment in the present where this story takes place. So this book, like even thinking about it now, I love it so much. It's amazing. I feel like I've seen mixed reviews on it, and I definitely can see why people didn't like it, but personally I just connected connected to it so much. I feel like the whole message of it just like really hit me. And also something else I really loved about this book is that the characters were so flawed. Like they weren't really great characters at all. Like they made a lot of really bad and dumb decisions at times, and it made me so mad at them, but like that's what I loved about it. Like it just felt very real because it was more realistic that way. Like I didn't want them to be perfect people. So yeah, I just love this book. I always tell people to read it. It is a very heartbreaking book, but it's also one of those books that I just really want more people to read. Next is the Twisted series by Anna Huang, books 3 and 4. So Twisted Lies and Twisted Hate. Both of these came out in 2022. Twisted Hate came out in January, and then Twisted Lies came out in June. Obviously, like I said, I'm grouping series together. I did love Twisted Lies more. It did rank a little bit higher just because I am obsessed with this book. It was amazing, but Twisted Hate was also really good. I do have a video also for this series on my channel where I talk all about it. I talk about all 4 books in that video, but obviously I only read the last 2 this year. Next, continuing with series, is the Dreamland Billionaire series by Lauren Asher. So the first book is The Fine Print, and then book 2 is Terms and Conditions. With these 2, both of them were so good. Both of them did make my top 10, but Terms and Conditions was my favorite of these 2. I just loved this book so much. It's a marriage of convenience trope and age gap and then workplace romance. So she is his assistant, and then he ends up marrying her to get his inheritance from his grandfather who passed away. And then in The Fine Print, it's Grumpy Sunshine, also workplace romance. He's her boss. So this series follows these like billionaire brothers who basically run this company that their grandfather started. That's like the equivalent of Disney. And so I read both of these earlier this year, and I loved The Fine Print, so I was so excited for Terms and Conditions. And then Terms and Conditions was even better in my opinion. I loved it so much. So yeah, I highly recommend both of these, and I'm so excited for the 3rd one that's coming out next year. The next book is It Starts With Us by Colleen Hoover. This is the sequel to It Ends With Us, and she announced this earlier this year, and I was so excited to read this book. I absolutely loved it. I feel like there were so many mixed reviews for it, but personally I thought it was great. It lived up to all my expectations, and I just really enjoyed it overall. I thought it was a really sweet book, and I just really liked getting a sequel with these characters and seeing them have like a happy ending and everything. I really loved It Ends With Us. It's one of my favorite books, so I kind of knew going into this one that I was also going to love it. The next book is another Colleen Hoover book, and that's Reminders of Him. This one came out in January. I also did a book review video for this. I think that this one is definitely one of her best books. I just loved it. I thought it was such an amazing story. This one follows a woman who just got out of prison, and she goes back to this town because her daughter is there. She has obviously been in prison, so she has not seen her daughter. She doesn't have a relationship with her, but she's determined to be in her life. And then while she's there, she meets this guy who is kind of connected to her daughter, and so she starts to get closer to him, and that kind of starts to cause issues for him, but they kind of are obviously falling for each other. So yeah, this one was just a very impactful story. I couldn't stop thinking about it. It's also definitely like in my top Colleen Hoover books. Next is the Addicted and Calloway Sister series. Again, this is where I really needed to group series together because all of these were amazing and they were going to be in my top 10, so it would have just taken up more slots in my top 10 and I would have just been talking about the series for like half the video. But the books that I read in this series this year were Thrive, Addicted After All, Feel the Fire, and Long Way Down. So of all of these, my absolute favorite was for sure Addicted After All. This book was just amazing to me. It follows Lily and Lo, and this is the 5th book in their series. But this couple, I just love them with all of my heart. They are by far my all-time favorite book couple. Like the love that they have for each other is just so beautiful, and I loved reading about it. I just loved this book so much. It was just perfect to me. I put off reading it for the longest time because I wasn't ready to be done with Lily and Lo's story, but I finally read it. I'm so glad that I did because it was just amazing, and I cried while reading it because it was just so good. But yeah, this one is definitely my favorite of the ones that I read this year. It's probably my favorite in the whole series of the ones that I've read so far. Obviously, I don't have a video dedicated to the Calloway Sisters series on my channel as of now because I'm not done with it yet, but once I finish it, I'll have a video at some point. But yeah, I love this series so much. I will never get over how amazing it is. If you haven't read it yet, I highly recommend it. Definitely check trigger warnings. This series, specifically the Addicted series, does follow 2 people who have addictions. The main characters are Lily and Lo. Lily is a sex addict and Lo is an alcoholic. And then the Calloway Sisters series just follows Lily's 2 other sisters. So I feel like I constantly bring this series up because of how much I love it. So obviously it was in my top 10 for the year. And then the last book that is in my top 10 of 2022 is Say You Swear by Megan Brandy. I read it back in April, I'm pretty sure, and I'm still not over it. It was just amazing. I literally finished it so fast. It's a pretty long book. It's like over 500 pages. I was a little bit intimidated to start it, but then I did. And it started off a little bit slow, I will say, but then it picks up at like the 25% mark. And at that point, I literally couldn't put it down. I finished the rest of it like in a day pretty much. It was just one of those books where honestly, it kind of made me anxious. Like I had to, the only reason I continued reading it so fast is because I had to know how it was going to end, but it was so worth it in the end. It was amazing. I just loved it so much. I love these characters so much. It's just one of my favorite books that I've ever read, and I didn't expect that at all because like I just kind of expected it to be like a fun little sports romance, maybe like a few tears in there because I did hear that it was kind of a sad book, but I just didn't expect to love it as much as I did. The love interest in it is my all-time favorite book boyfriend ever. He is just perfect. I love him so much. But yeah, it's kind of hard to say what this book is about without giving anything away, so I just won't. I think it's better to go into it knowing nothing. Definitely check trigger warnings for it, but I did do a video on my channel all about this book. I went a little bit more in depth of what it's about and kind of my review on it and everything, but I would highly recommend it. Obviously it's like my #1 top read of the whole year. So yeah, those were my top 10 books of 2022. I really enjoyed all of these. They were all such amazing books. Definitely let me know any of your thoughts or let me know your favorites of the year. And if you liked this and you're new to my channel, I would love it if you'd stick around and subscribe, and thank you so much for watching.